A win in the opener versus Virginia Tech could catapult Vandy into a bowl game.
You are Locked On Vandy, your daily podcast on the Vanderbilt Commodores, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Corey Burton. Thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sportsing like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's episode, we analyze a few upset candidates on Vandy's schedule. Is the road game at Kentucky one of those games? Can Vandy get a win on the Plains versus Auburn? Well, first, Vandy squares off in the opener versus Virginia Tech. A win here could catapult them into a bowl game. You didn't stutter. You heard that right. I think that's exactly how I feel on this one. I think a win in the opener will give Vandy enough juice, I think, to get into a bowl game. So, how important is this game? And how could this win build a snowball of momentum? I think that's the overarching question. I think that's what people are wondering. How could this build a snowball of momentum? And to me, I think with all the changes that have happened, with everything that this program has been through since last November, the atrocious 2-10 season, the embarrassing losses, a couple of the more competitive losses, the near bench clearing brawl at Tennessee, all that stuff. It led to Clark Lee firing his coordinators, taking over defensive play calling, basically hiring what would be New Mexico State's almost their entire staff, including head coach Jerry Kill, offensive coordinator Tim Beck, and many more. They got their top two quarterbacks. They've got their tight end, and they got their defensive coordinator. They've got a lot of influence from New Mexico State. And I talked about it on a previous episode. Why was Clark Lee so intrigued by Virginia Tech? What made him, not Virginia Tech, that's their opener. He's definitely intrigued by that one. But why was he intrigued by New Mexico State? What made him land on that game in particular? And that intriguement happened because of a game on the Plains, in which we'll talk about. I think that kind of leads. I think that episode kind of leads to where we are now, as far as just kind of where this program is, what are our expectations, things like that. But I mean, this game, is important because I think it solidifies everything that Clark Lee's done, from the strength and conditioning portion of it, the transfer portal thing. He's reorged practices to make them more competitive. I think there's a really good nucleus of players. All of that. He's had a tremendous offseason so far. You can't debate that. For what they went through in 2023 to now, has been quite the turnaround. Now we'll see if that all plays out on the field, which, it's easier said than done. And that's probably the hardest part, especially playing in the league that Vandy plays in, is being able to essentially cash those checks, the checks that you've been getting in the offseason. So the importance of this game is your first real test. Okay. It's a home game, and it's supposed to be, may not be, but half of the major renovation plan is supposed to be completed. Those seats are sold out. The other half is coming at the beginning of next season. So your stadium project's almost done. Okay. You've got a lot of positive momentum here. And this is the first real test of, hey, are the changes working? Have we built a team that can compete, right? That is why it's important. And that is why a great performance here. I mean, even if Vandy doesn't win, even if there's not a victory here, if you lose a tough battle, you're competitive, you're good all the way through, and you just get outclassed in the final moments against a good team like Virginia Tech, that could even serve as a little bit of a catalyst. Probably not as much as a win, but I think you get a win here. And next thing you know, I think there are 5 more wins on the schedule all of a sudden. I think you're looking at a season to where, I think bowl game is well within reach, because you win against Virginia Tech, you're going to get Alcorn, you're going to get Georgia State as a result. You're going to come into Missouri 3-0. I mean, depending on where Missouri's at and depending on what's going on with them, because how they start the season is important too. I mean, this is a game that that potentially could be, if Missouri starts slow or starts sloppy, Vandy could kind of jump on them and get an upset there. It's not likely, because I think Missouri is their trajectory is heading this way, but that's kind of like the deep sleeper upset game that we could talk about. I think a win here, though, it's right there, and a bowl game is right there for the taking if you can get off of the starting blocks. If you can get out of the starting blocks against Virginia Tech, that is definitely going to give you all that momentum. But what does Virginia Tech provide? What are the roadblocks that Vandy has to get past? It's, they return a lot of people. They return, they return a lot of starters. They have 4 great receivers. They were a bowl team last year, and I believe they lost. They have all-time record 6-3 versus Vanderbilt. I think the hat hanger of Vanderbilt's team is going to be the defense. And when I was on the Golden Boot, he asked me, what is this team going to be known for? What are they going to hang their hat on? It's going to be defense, right? So Virginia Tech, they lose not many starters. They return most of their starters. They lost starting tight end Daquan Wright. They returned Kyron Drones at quarterback. I think that's a very important piece. Kyron Drones is somebody that is elusive. That's really, really good. Had an outstanding season for them last year. And it's it's something that is very important for a team. And you have to, when you return your quarterback, that's a really, really good thing. So that's going to be a challenge for Vanderbilt. I mean, you have a team that's kind of in tune a little bit. They return receivers, they have production at running back, things like that. So, but for the thing that stands out about this game, okay, so for all those challenges, Kyron Drones, great quarterback. And they have a lot of production coming back, but they have trouble closing out games. They ranked 88th in FBS points per fourth quarter, averaging just 6.2 in the fourth quarter. So if they get into a situation to where it's close and it's shaky and they have to close out a game, that could be some nerves could take over. You're on the road. It's probably going to be 1,000,000 degrees in Nashville if it's not storming. The atmosphere is going to be weird because half of it's going to be a construction site. The other half it's going to be a weird environment for Virginia Tech, and it's going to be something that, quite frankly, is in Vandy's favor. I don't know how well Virginia Tech fans travel. That remains to be seen. Most of the schools that have come down to Nashville, unfortunately, have traveled well, but that's neither here nor there. Vandy's defense does have their work cut out for them for sure, and they're going to have to stop a very veteran-laden offense, which I think under Clark Lee's tutelage, you have to think that there's going to be pressure, there's going to be aggressiveness. I think the corners they're going to have the work cut out for them, but they're up to it. But if they can stop the run, force Virginia Tech to be one-dimensional, I think there's a chance here. There's a chance that like you just keep this thing close. You just keep striking. You just keep moving the ball. You disrupt, force turnovers. You hit the quarterback any chance you get. Knock him down. Even if he completes a pass, knock him down. Make him earn it. Because in the third and fourth quarter, those hits turn into maybe he winces a little earlier, or maybe he lets go of a ball too soon because there's pressure in his face, and he throws a pick late in the game because you've been hitting him all game and he's tired of that. So just those things take a toll on it. And those are the kind of momentum building things that like you start doing that against a quality team, you get a win versus a quality team. Now you're catapulting, you go, oh, well, this ain't so bad. We can actually do this. We can actually get after a team. And if there's a team that has more question marks than Virginia Tech, it may, this thing may play out a lot differently. So a big win here could catapult Vandy in a bowl game. I wholeheartedly believe that. I think, the goal is a bowl game. I think that's very much intact here. I think there's some things, and I'll preview Virginia Tech more in depth as we go. There'll be plenty of chances to kind of look further into this matchup and really kind of piece together what Virginia Tech does well, what Vandy does well, and how do those things match up. We'll have plenty of time to dive into the specifics of that game, but just know that Kyron Drones is a big factor for Virginia Tech, and you get to him early and often, it could spell a victory. Victory could spell more victory down the road and could spell a bowl game. So in order to get to a bowl game, you need 6 wins. Well, you get through the first 3 weeks at 3-0, you still need 3 wins, okay? Ball State's looming out there on the schedule, which means there's 2 other upsets out there, okay? Does Vandy have a chance to get a win at Kentucky? I think that's your first real chance at an upset or at a winnable upset game. Vandy's not going to be favored in any of these conference games, but this is the best, this is your first best chance at an upset. Can they get it at Kentucky? We'll talk about it next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games. And the sports just aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up any bets anytime that I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers. That's right. You heard that correctly. All customers with a booster or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Are you watching ESPN or Fox Sports? Are you tired of all that screaming? You have to turn down the TV, all that good stuff. You don't want to do that. What you want to do is make the switch to Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Shout out to the everydayers. Thank you for making all of this possible. Thank you for tuning in. If you want to be a part of that, make sure you find us wherever you find your podcast and on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. Spread the word, guys. It's getting out there, but we just got to keep pressing on. Keep pressing on. Football season. It's right on the heels. Okay. We are nipping at the heels of football season. It is almost here. I can taste it. Fall camp starts in probably 3 weeks. So it can't get here fast enough. I'm telling you, there's only so many times I can talk about potential. I want to get some real stuff going, which won't be long. Be patient. All right. So we talked about the importance of the opener versus Virginia Tech. It is a tone setter. To sum it up in 2 words, the opener versus Virginia Tech is a tone setter. It can mean you get shellacked. It's here we go again. Maybe 4 wins is the goal. You lose a close one. Okay, we have a chance. You win it, man. I think you win a few more because of the momentum it builds. It is an important game because it's a tone setter, and part of that is traveling to Kentucky. All right, and the reason why Kentucky, I think, is your first upset candidate. Okay, because I think this is one of your better chances of getting a win. It certainly is not going to be Texas. I would love for it to be Texas. It's just not likely. But injuries, all that stuff, you never know. All right. But Kentucky's added weapons. All right. The offensive line struggled last year. And it's going to come down to that, I think. This is going to be a game where, honestly, it's going to be won on the lines. And most games are like that, but some games are a little more emphasis on the line than others. And this one is certainly going to be that. How are these lines going to match up against each other? How is Kentucky's O-line going to match up with Vandy's D-line? And vice versa. How's Vandy's O-line going to match up with Kentucky's D-line? That is probably the most important question in this matchup. And I think it's something that with the new schemes on both sides, I think there's a little bit more there'll be a little bit more familiarity with schemes because Diego Pavia from day one has probably already ingrained these schemes into his team because he knew them coming in. Brock Vandagriff didn't know them coming in. He's still trying to get to know it, and he's still trying to get his guys up to speed. So that's probably the biggest question mark for this offense. I mean, you have a chance. I think Vandy's defense, again, being built the way it's built, and for Clark Lee being able to call the defense and being able to focus a little more than a head coach usually is able to focus, I think is an important thing. And I think this is an advantage for Vanderbilt. And I never thought I'd say that, but it is. And, you have brand new schemes with you lose Liam Cohen, you hire Bush Hamden from Boise State, which is actually a really good hire, I think. But there's some things outside of scheme that I think are important here. One program is starting to kind of believe. Another one is a little shaky. They love Mark Stoops, but I think him going after the Texas A&M job affected him more than people think. And that's gotta when we preview and when we get really more in depth with Kentucky, we'll see. And as the season plays out, you'll kind of see that impact a little bit. And I'm gonna talk to my man Vinny Hardy and just kind of see the temperature of all that. I don't want to say turmoil. That's probably a bit strong, but like it did leave a little bit of a lasting impression or a little bit of a mark there. They Devin Leary had a okay season, not great. You lose Ray Davis, that's a huge blow. You get Brock Vandagriff, who's an extremely talented quarterback, 5-star coming out of high school, signed at Georgia, transferred in. He's gonna finally get to kind of see some action here. You're gonna kind of get to see what he's all about. But at the same time, we just don't know right now. And by the time we get to this game, obviously there'll be some questions that are answered. This, the tone of this game will probably shift dramatically in one direction or the other, depending on what Brock Vandagriff has accomplished or has been able, or lack thereof, if that's the case. They've got some people coming in, DeMonte Trainum or Chip Trainum, Barryon Brown, who kind of thought about transferring, and I think he would have if Mark Stoops left for Texas A&M. He comes back. He might be one of the fastest people I've ever seen. And Vandy fans and Nashville natives know who Barryon Brown is. He played at Pearl Cone right down the road from us. That dude can flat out go. He has a gear that I haven't seen, that you don't see in a lot of people, right? And then, of course, the offensive line. You have left tackle Marquise Cox that's coming back, but it's really kind of about it there on the offensive line. So can they get this upset? I think it's possible. Like there's a lot of question marks there. You got to have an answer for Barryon Brown, which I think they will. It's a tough one to answer, but I think they can. But you've got to you've got to kind of answer those questions a little bit. And I think Kentucky has a little too many questions right now to answer. Kentucky's going to be stingy against the run. They always are. But there's some opportunity in the passing game that I think can loosen them up a little bit. But it's overall, I think there's something here. And Kentucky is one of those teams that's just kind of in a weird place right now because you don't really know based on what they lost. Like you don't really know. Okay, did they lose a lot? Did they, did it matter? Did they gain enough back? Is the offense going to flow? I mean, I think there's a lot of things that have to be answered. I think there's a lot of possibilities here that leave Kentucky's team a little clunky and a little just unsure. Now they could come in and contend for a playoff spot. We just don't know. And I think this makes them, and the fact that they don't really have anything to hang their hat on just yet, they don't know because it's all new. The weirdness of Mark Stoops flirting with Texas A&M, and for all intents and purposes, taking that job. So it's going to be a weird one. And this game, I think, will be one that we have to keep an eye on. This matchup will certainly the dynamics of this will certainly shift by the time you get to it because it is right after Alabama, right before Ball State. So it's going to be one of those that's late enough in the season to where some things have been established, but still early on enough to be able to, get things right before you stretch run to see, hey, is there a game in here we need to get? And what do we need to do? So this is an interesting one to say the least, but question marks at quarterback and on the offensive line and defensive lines. Those being your main question marks of, what is it going to look like? How is it going to shake out? That's the concerning part. And that's what leads me to believe that Kentucky is an upset candidate for sure. Now, can we say the same thing about Auburn? There's some things about Auburn that are very interesting in a good way, very interesting in a bad way. Can Vandy pull the upset on the Plains against Auburn? We'll talk about it next. All right, welcome back. We are back, third and final segment. We are wrapping this show. Want to let you guys know that I appreciate every bit of your support. I appreciate everything that you guys are able to do as far as supporting the show. Make sure you be a friend, tell a friend, and spread the word, man. Make it to where the Everydayers Club is growing and growing and growing some more. We got to have it keep keeping on, right? So when you look at when you look at the subscription list, if you want to be the most educated fan base, make sure you check out Locked On SEC. Chris Gordy does a phenomenal job, and also check out the host of shows from around the conference for the SEC. It's a lot of great shows out there, and you're privy to it. So make sure you check all of that out, and be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll get this thing going. So, Auburn. Talk about Kentucky, and it's Kentucky's kind of a mystery a little bit. Like, can they get Kentucky? Yes, and then also no. Okay. Now, here's the weird thing about Auburn, because I think it's almost if Vandy should get the win against Auburn last year. So Vandy should technically be 1-1 against Auburn, because half of Vandy's team is the New Mexico State Aggies, or now Vandy's morphed into the Vandy State Aggie Doors. But in all seriousness, like a lot of the guys on this team, their last memory of Auburn and Jordan Air Stadium was walking out of there with a massive win, and a win that wasn't really much of a fluke either. So Hugh Freeze has got his work cut out for him. I think this is an interesting situation because when you look at what Hugh Freeze is able to do, it's been very up and down. It was very up and down last year. 2 games, you had 2 real big almost games against Georgia and Alabama. You had Alabama literally on the ropes, getting ready. You were throwing the knockout punch, and Alabama countered with their own knockout punch. And that's the 4th and 31. That game will probably be named 4th and 31 in that Iron Bowl series, right? Georgia, they had them on the ropes, not quite in the same position they had Alabama, but Brock Bowers took over in the 4th quarter, and the rest is history. So, but this is all going to hinge on if Peyton Thorne, who's returning as starting quarterback, what he can do. He had 1,755 yards and 16 touchdowns last season. He had a offense. He led an offense that was 92nd in total offense, 124th in passing at 162.2 yards per game. So it's one of those where I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing that Peyton Thorne is coming back as starter. I just know that offense, those numbers are pretty brutal, especially the 124th in passing. Peyton Thorne's a pretty good runner, though. And again, this, like I said, it's interesting because they do some things well, but passing the ball ain't one of them. And who knows, right? But they will be getting Jarquez Hunter back, who was almost 1,000-yard rusher last year. They get Rivaldo Fairweather back at tight end. He led the team with 394 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns, which is good and bad at the same time. They have a lot of new faces coming back. Not coming back, but coming in at wide receiver. They have 5 stars, Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson. So some two very talented kids, but they added some stuff in the portal as well. But again, when you add new pieces, and the same goes for Vandy, you just don't know how they're going to respond. And in an offense that had numbers like that, you just, with the same play callers, you don't know how it's going to respond. We know the gist of what Vandy's going to be able to do because the quarterback, it's almost as if you're getting a returning quarterback back because the brain trust calling the offense and the quarterback are absolutely on the same page. And the quarterback has a master's degree in the offense. So it's a little bit different because it was a very successful offense coming to a new place with some new players. And that's very key. So for the defense, they've just got to be stingy against the run here. And I think that your game is had. If you can be stingy against the run, stop Jarquez Hunter, stop Peyton Thorne, you have a shot. Because it seemed like at times Hugh Freeze didn't know how to respond. And he didn't know, it just almost seemed like when he got stumped, he was stumped. And he didn't really have much of an answer because passing the ball was not there. And Peyton Thorne was getting harassed all season long, and you just couldn't get much in the way of the passing game. The stats back that up. Excuse me. Defensively, Auburn returns a lot of key starters in every position group, but they will need some big improvement there. Again, it's one of those things where it's like, do you want to return a whole lot of starters? They weren't that great last year. But they lost 5 guys in the NFL draft, but I don't know, it's going to be interesting, right? There's a lot of questions here. And I think that's the reason why they are a prime candidate for an upset, because like at the point where they play Vandy, they're probably going to have a lot more questions answered one way or the other. And the volatility of this team and how well they perform those questions could be, who's going to be the head coach next year? And that will most certainly make them ripe for an upset. And I don't even know if it'd be much of an upset at that point. Or it could be, okay, they've turned a corner and now they're playing some really good football, and that could spell trouble for Vanderbilt. You just don't know. And that's the whole thing with a Hugh Freeze-led team. You just don't really know what you're going to get. And with these passing numbers, I think it's a really, really steep hill to climb. And for Vanderbilt, they can climb that hill. And I look forward to getting with Zach Blackerby, a host of Locked on Auburn, to really dive more into this matchup, to kind of see what Auburn brings to the table, to kind of see why or why not they're concerned about this game. Auburn fans probably aren't concerned about the Vanderbilt game in one bit. They're probably circling that game on their calendar going, win. That's one of their wins. That's the one they're banking on. And that can also, in a situation like this, can get you in trouble because you roll in on two wheels and two held together by duct tape and bubble gum. The pressure mounting to get this win could be to the point to where now Auburn's pressing a little bit and Vanderbilt has a chance to stomp them out. So, but that's where we're going to leave you. And all these games that I'm talking about, we're going to go. The plan is to go more in depth about each of these matchups. So I just wanted to kind of scratch the surface on a few upset candidates, how Vanderbilt could catapult themselves into a bowl game if they can open the season with a win against Virginia Tech. So with that being said, we're going to leave you there. Hope you have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you soon. We'll see you back here tomorrow on the Locked on Vandy podcast on the Locked on Podcast Network. Anchor down.